Dear church, let's talk about the preacher and benefits.
Dear church, let's talk Holy Spirit,
Transformation,
prayer.
6 days, right?
And if you love me, you will keep my commandments.
Our culture wants to define you by your sexuality. We know that our identity is now in Christ.
Hello and welcome to the Dear Church podcast. I'm your host, Chris McCurley, joined today by good friend, fellow church member, and my insurance guy, Chris Webb. Thank you, Chris, for being here. I was trying to get an applause sign in here so we could get like a piped in applause or anything, but sorry, that's the only reception you get.
No worries. Man, I appreciate you having me.
Yeah.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, so before we jump into our conversation, just tell all our viewers and listeners who you are, what you do, got something about your family. Your wife's been on the podcast. So.
She has. Yeah, she has. She, probably had a lot better things to say than what I've got to offer today. But no, I'm oddly enough, I've been in the insurance business for almost 10 years now, and came from ministry.
Yes, you did.
Did full-time youth ministry for most of my career, and we just kept having kids. And after we got to we were outnumbered, so we decided, hey, we're going to have to kind of do something a little more conducive. And so went over to the insurance world and took a lot of things from ministry into that with me, which has really been a benefit. But man, it's I work for Farm Bureau Insurance. Of course, you met my wife. We've got 4 kids, and so it's just been a blessing, man. We've been glad we made the change years ago. It's really helped out our family dynamic and everything. But yeah, just hopefully hope to have something that'll help your listeners and something to add. So.
I have no doubt that you will. Your wife, Erin, head girls basketball coach at Dixon County. She was on here to talk about that. And then you have 4 kids. You got one that's going to be a senior.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about that. I'm not ready for that. Yeah, I've been struggling with my baby girl getting ready to graduate high school next year. So,
which is interesting because you've got a senior, you've got Hunter who will be a junior, but then you skipped many years and then had 2 other little girls.
Well, when you have the first 2 13 months apart, that's so hectic. We're like, man, we're never doing this again. We're done. And then we got down the road where it was time to make some tough decisions, and we're like, hey, let's have more. And so, we've got a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old on top of a 16 and 17-year-old. So, it's never a dull moment in our house.
Yeah, you got some built-in babysitters. That's nice.
No doubt.
And so you work at Farm Bureau, done that for 10 years. Before that, you were in ministry. So youth ministry in Centerville, which is Hickman County. People who know their Tennessee geography will know that. And then you were at Graymere, which is a great congregation in Columbia for a while. Talk a little bit, because you just said this a moment ago, talk a little bit about how that sets you up for what you're doing now, how ministry has played a part into what you do now.
And, I'm a full-time insurance agent. And so I spend all day, every day working with people. And so ministry is all about working with people, trying to meet people's needs, trying to help them where they are. And I don't know that I realized it when I got in the business, but quickly, you start to realize that in insurance, you're dealing with people in all walks of life and at different times of their life. There are times where, you help someone trying to reconcile their family's estate because they've had a loved one pass away. There are times where someone's having some financial difficulties and you're trying to help them figure out how they can save some money and still make things work. And so, the ministry aspect of things applies to this each and every day, because it's trying to care for people, trying to figure out how I can help people, and just meet them where they are. And that was all those years of ministry, just getting to be in those situations. You well know, you find yourself in all kind of places, and, you catch people in some of the worst days of their life. And oddly enough, insurance is no different. Back a few years ago, we had an awful tornado that came through Dixon County, and several of my customers completely lost their homes. And so, being able to go out the morning that happened and just be with them, help them file claims and figure out what the next steps are going to look like. And beyond all the insurance stuff, just being able to be there with them when they don't have any idea what's coming up next. And so, I did not realize that all those years in ministry was going to help prepare me for doing this business, but it has, and I've been really grateful for it.
That's what I appreciate about you and your job, is that you go and meet people where they're at. I have all my insurance with Farm Bureau and with you, but I even moved over my life insurance that had my grandfather purchased for me when I was like 16. And at the time I didn't appreciate it. Now I do. And so 2 different policies there that I've moved over with you. And one of the things that is a selling point with you having that policy or those two policies is that, if I were to die tomorrow, you would take a check to my wife, and there's not a lot of red tape and things of that nature. And you do that now. I mean, like you said, with that tornado, we've had some flooding, we've had some disasters here in Dixon County over the last several years, and you've been able to go and provide for somebody almost immediately, be able to cut them a check, and that's invaluable. Right?
Man, that's when you deliver a death claim check to someone, that's probably what I would say is one of the greatest honors that I get to do in my job.
Yeah.
And I take a lot of pride in that, because if I do my job up front and helping people figure out where the gaps are in their coverages and things like that, then on a day like that, I get to deliver a really nice check to a family that needs it.
For sure.
And our process, man, that's one of my favorite things. There's tons of, and I'll talk more about this as we go, but there's tons of places you can go online and sign up for things like that. But, the way Farm Bureau allows us to do it, if there's a death claim, then I handle that myself. I hand deliver those checks. And we normally do that with inside of a week most of the time. And so I don't know a lot of companies that are able to do that. But man, I can tell you, I've been able to deliver some of those checks with my own customers over the years. And man, I don't take that lightly.
No, that's big. That's big. Reason I want to have you on is because as ministers, you've dealt with this. We don't always get many benefits. Typically you provide those benefits. Not every church is this way, but a lot of churches are, where they're able to provide a good salary, but not necessarily anything beyond that. And, when we talk about insurance, health insurance, life insurance, whatever it is, typically those are not benefits that are included with a preacher's salary. You provide those yourself. And so I didn't really want you to come on today and talk about all the ins and outs of that, but mainly life insurance and the benefits there. We have somebody else that's going to come on and talk more about other benefits later. But I know that's your specialty area. Although before my wife went back to work, we had health insurance through Farm Bureau. Yep. There is some underwriting that Farm Bureau does that you can get it cheaper than through the marketplace. And so you can talk about that if you want to. But let's start here. What's the most important thing that a person needs to know, a minister needs to know, when it comes to these sort of benefits?
Man, I would say, if you ask me, like, hands down, the most important thing, I'm probably going to say something you're not expecting, but I would say it's having an agent to work with. Mm-hmm. When I was in ministry all those years, I had an agent that I worked with, and I just trusted him exclusively. He was a Farm Bureau agent, still a good friend of mine to this day. And I never asked questions because I didn't know what questions to ask. I would get myself a truck, and I would call him, "Hey, I bought this truck. Can you insure it?" And he said, "Yeah, I've got you taken care of." And he would give me information, but I never really asked for it because I didn't know what to ask. Yeah. And then when I got in the insurance business, and I started looking back over my policies and stuff, it was so funny to me that I thought, man, I didn't know what I didn't know.
Right.
I didn't. And there's so many aspects to insurance in general that you have to have some know-how to do it. And for, when I was in youth ministry, I didn't care about insurance, right? So that's why I went to someone who's like, "Hey man, just tell me what I need, help me out." Right. And he would educate me on that. I work with people every day who come in, who are in their 40s, 50s, even 60s, right, who sit down with an agent for, the first time in years. And as we start talking through things, they say, "Man, I had no idea that's how that worked. I didn't understand what that coverage was, or I didn't realize how I didn't have enough coverage here." And so I would tell you, first and foremost, get an agent. Whatever company you go with. A lot of companies still have agents. A lot of them have gotten away from that. But it's no different. I always use this comparison. It's like I could go online and do my own taxes. Right. But I don't know anything about taxes. And so if I go online and do my own taxes, that's going to be a disaster, right? So I have an accountant that I pay to do my taxes. So to me, it's no different in the insurance world. So I would tell you, hands down, find someone that you trust, that you can build a relationship with, someone you can sit down with face to face. They're going to help you figure out what your needs are. They're going to help you address those needs. They're going to help you figure out how to do that cost effectively. Farm Bureau has always been very agent focused on, they like to do things through an agent because they see the importance of that. Right. And I think a lot of companies are getting away from that, just trying to save money on having to pay an agent to do those things. But like I said, if you don't if you don't have the education of all the ins and outs of insurance, you could get yourself in trouble really quickly. So I would say that's probably first and foremost. Find you someone that can help you work through all that stuff.
It's invaluable because, you and I are good friends, but even I think it would be the case even if we weren't. I can text you. I bought a truck recently. I actually bought it from you. But I bought a truck recently, and I said, "Hey, can you tell me what insurance?" I just text you, tell me what insurance would be on this, and I get a response pretty quick. I mean, somebody that is interactive with you, and I feel like I wear you out sometimes, but you're always responsive. I can go in the office, I can sit down with you and say, "Hey, I'm thinking about this. What do you think?" And with the life insurance, I'm with you. I don't know much about it. I wish I did. I wish my brain worked in those circles, but it just really doesn't. And so for you to be able to sit down and explain it to me and to be able to hash all that out is truly invaluable. But my first preaching job, I was paid $750 a week, and I had to take state income tax out of that because one like Tennessee, we had to pay state income tax in Missouri. And then I had to figure out, a budget for everything else. We had 3 kids. We had a parsonage, so we didn't have that payment. But we had all the other bills that, a young married couple has with 3 kids. And so having to figure all that out. And the idea of, life insurance and insurance and all that, I mean, just was terrifying, because it's all expensive, right?
Yeah.
So when you're a young minister and you're sitting down, you're thinking about, what's priority here? What am I willing to spend? What can I do? What would you tell somebody in that situation? If you were to sit down with them and just say, "Hey, we're going to start from scratch," here's what I would say to you.
Man, so life insurance is an interesting topic from the standpoint of everybody understands that they need it.
Mm-hmm.
But so many people who I work with will always have that thought of like, "Hey, one day I'm going to do that when I can afford it, this and that."
Yeah.
It's like if you go buy a car, you have to get auto insurance. Like the state will not let you drive without it.
Yeah.
If you go buy a home and you take out a mortgage, the bank is going to make you have homeowners insurance.
Yep.
Life insurance is not like that. I would tell anyone getting into ministry, especially a young man, that it is not as expensive as you think. You buy life insurance with 2 things. The first one is your age, and the second one is your health.
Yeah.
So if you are young and you are healthy, it is not very expensive. I write policies all the time for young men and women. $250,000 to $500,000 in coverage for $15 to $20 a month.
Yeah.
These days that's going through the drive-through one time a month. So
Right.
It's not as expensive as you think. But I would say even more than that, do it sooner than later, because you buy it with your health, right? So today, man, I'm perfectly healthy and I'm young and I could go buy it, and it's like I'm going to put that off a year. And I can tell you, we don't know what our health is going to be a year from now.
You remember mine termed out, and we renewed, and then got cancer. And you were telling me you probably wouldn't have gotten life insurance.
Oh man, yeah,
for anything cheap.
Oh, your cancer
I'd waited-
diagnosis came months after we finished all your life insurance.
Yeah, it was close.
And I mean, it's crazy. That's not typical, but it can happen. I mean, and you're in the same boat. You definitely wouldn't have the price you have now.
Yeah.
But depending on a lot of other factors, who knows if you would even have been insurable, after a cancer diagnosis.
But see, that's what I thought as a young person. I'm young and I have my health. Why do I need life insurance?
Right.
But the flip side of that is I'm young and I have my health, but I have 3 kids at home that are very young. And what if something happens? Because things happen, right? So that's the other side of that coin.
Yeah. Well, you just, part of why I think people struggle to buy life insurance is it's a miserable conversation, right? I'm going to sit here and go face to face with my own mortality, that I'm not going to live forever.
Yeah.
Something could happen to me. And then I've got to think about what my wife and all my kids are going to do if something happens to me.
Yeah.
And it's kind of depressing, I have this conversation with people every day. And I always tell them, like, hey, this is not a fun conversation, but this is what we're going to do.
Right.
We're going to talk about this right now. We're going to work out what you guys need. And when you guys agree on what you want to do, we're going to do that. And we don't have to talk about it again. We're going to get this taken care of and it's done. And you can go to bed tonight knowing that, hey, my family's taken care of. I encourage people, set this up on a monthly bank draft so you don't have to think about paying it,
That's
like just let that come out and you don't have to think about, this thought again of like, man, what if something happens to me? Just take care of that and move on. But it's easy to kick that can down the road just over and over and over until, it may be too late and you're not insurable, or it gets so expensive that you're like, man, I can't afford this. So.
Well, my grandfather, when I turned 16, said, I've got a gift for you. And it was that life insurance policy. And I'm like, wow, thanks. I was hoping for a car, but, a life insurance policy. And then as you get older, you start to appreciate it. But also, one thing that I learned as I got older is this thing's not accruing millions of dollars. You think, well, my wife's going to get $500 million when I pass away. And, the truth of the matter is it's not a lot considering how long I've had it. But what it does do is it pays for the funeral for sure.
Yeah.
And, you think about the expense of a funeral now. Man, if you can get that covered and that's not a burden on your family. So that's to me, one of the biggest benefits.
Man, I have been in the room with a family that has planned a funeral out before with no life insurance at all.
Yeah.
And they were paying out of pocket for it. And it was heartbreaking to see when you look at the prices of things. I have to consider, because even though this particular funeral director is amazing, and I remember him telling this family, hey, you don't have to equate how much you love your loved one by the price tag on this.
Good point.
But nobody wants to go in there and said, hey, I just need the cheapest of everything or whatever it may be, and so that just alleviates. I tell people, oddly enough, I have life insurance on all 4 of my kids. That's not a fun conversation to have with people. We talk about that. But I thought long ago that if something happened to one of my children on the absolute worst day of my life, I don't want to have to think about, man, how am I going to pay for this? I don't want to have to go in that room and say, hey, I can't afford this or that. And so I've done that on each one of my kids when they were born. And you talk about doing something, never wanting to think about it again.
Yeah.
I did that for them and I don't think about it anymore. That just gets drafted out of my bank account every month. And again, I pray I never have to use that, but if something did happen, I don't have to worry about
It's
that.
the what ifs. Yeah. And you said it a while ago, but that's something that I thought about and that resonated with me when you and I talked, is that if I pass away, and I will eventually, that my wife, in her grief, we hope that she's grieving, in her grief, she's going to know that that's one less thing I have to think about, that there's not a $10,000 check I got to come up with. I would hope she wouldn't spend that much on a funeral anyway, but so let's shift gears a little bit to retirement, just retirement in general.
Yeah.
So I'm a big believer, start that early, right? You said it a while ago, many times we want to kick the can down the road. We don't think about it until we get a little older. I've already harped on with my kids who are, adults now, but they're young adults, is like, start that now, pay yourself now, put money back now. Add to that, what would you say about retirement and any advice that you could give on that?
Yeah, I'm definitely not a retirement specialist, but I talk about this to people every day. It's funny, my 16-year-old son has a lawn mowing business, and he's making money this summer, and he come in the other night and said, hey, Dad, I want to turn this into more money, So we had this conversation the other night. I remember being in high school years ago, and you probably had this same experience. I talk to people all the time. They tell you in high school, hey, if you would just put, some like really low amount, $25 or $50 a month, go put that in some kind of account, and then when you're 65 years old, you'll have $4 million or something crazy, And I remember being in high school going, oh yeah, I'm going to do that. Well, I didn't do that. Nobody ever does that.
No.
And so, my advice to him the other night, that would be the same advice I'd give for anybody, is just do something, start saving something.
Yeah.
I think just like a Roth IRA is one of the easiest things to do just because of the tax benefits to that. But if it's nothing more than going and buying an annuity that you put $25 a month into, do something.
Yep.
Because something is going to be better than nothing. Because again, you find yourself in that situation where, at least when my wife and I first got married, $25 a month would have been a lot of money to us, right?
Yes.
Like we lived on top of a funeral home when we first got married. That's which was a blessing to us at the time.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's not a joke.
Yeah. That was a blessing at the time. But man, we were scraping by. And looking back, yes, we probably could have sacrificed cable TV or something to put $25 a month back. But we didn't. We used all of our paycheck at that time just to live. And then I remember she got a job, and now also we've got this extra income. Yeah. And so those are times, like I said, in those kind of events, you get a pay raise. Like, think about that. Just put something back. Start saving. I would tell you to, speak with a financial planner or a professional on that stuff. They could tell you probably better places to put that stuff. But at the end of the day, my advice would be do something. Start doing something immediately, and you will not regret that.
Yeah, it is a unique situation as a minister in that you do have to really account for all that yourself. And it's not just for you, it's for your family. And, many situations, a minister is working full time, his wife is staying home full time. And so, yeah, need to start early. Last question for you. So when we talk about insurance, we talk about rates, because everything costs money. So we're talking about insurance rates. I was surprised moving from Texas to Tennessee how much lower the rates are here. So my car insurance went way down. My home insurance went way down. Yeah. So everything was a little cheaper in that respect. But there's also things that you can do to save yourself money. And this goes back to your advice in the beginning, is have an agent that you can talk to. But talk a little bit about that, some advice for ministers and anyone that's listening, what they can do about their rates and how they can, make them more manageable.
Yeah. When I had this conversation in my office, the first thing that I look at would be someone's deductible. Just simply put, a deductible is the part that you're going to be responsible for if you have a claim, right? Yeah. So, if you've got a homeowner's policy and you've got a $1,500 deductible and it's a $10,000 claim, then we're going to pay out $8,500, right? You're responsible for $1,500 of it. In a perfect world, we want those deductibles as low as can be. I don't want to come out of pocket any more than I have to.
Right.
But there's some savings to be had if you'll raise your deductibles up.
Mm-hmm.
When you mentioned I've got a 16 and a 17-year-old who are now on my auto insurance. So anybody out there's got a teenager on auto insurance knows what I'm talking about. It's not an inexpensive rate. And so the moment that my first 17-year-old got her license, I knew my rate went up. I thought, I've got to do something. And so I moved all my deductibles, my auto insurance up as high as I could get them.
Yeah.
Now, the bummer is if we have a claim, I've got to come out of pocket more money.
Right.
But if we don't, I'm saving a lot of money right now. Yeah. So I would tell anyone, sit down and have your agent give you some quotes on, what would a $500 deductible look like? What's a $1,000 deductible look like? And sometimes you can find some big savings in that. Yeah. Likewise, I tell you, this is something to think about, but talk to your agent about filing a claim. Mm-hmm. You have insurance, your insurance is there if you ever need it. But I have this conversation with people a lot of times, that sometimes filing claims can affect your rate down the road. Mm-hmm. And so, if you've got a chip in your windshield and you could go to a glass place and have that fixed for $100 or $200, it would probably be cheaper for you in the long run just to go and pay and have that fixed and not use your insurance for it. Yeah. And granted, there's coverage there for those things. But I think it's kind of, I go over this with my customers all the time. Call me if you have a claim and let's do the math on it. Let's see what this might look like.
Yeah.
I had a tree fall on my house about 2 years ago. Yeah. Stood in the driveway and watched this tree fall right through the middle of my house. Mm. That's a no-brainer, right? I filed a claim. Yeah, I filed a claim on it because I didn't have a choice. It was going to be so much money that it's a no-brainer. Yeah. But if it's just a few $100s, or if it's something that's like, man, I could just pay this out of pocket and keep this off my record, and keep my rates lower, then sometimes there's an advantage to doing that. Yeah. But yeah, there's a couple of things that you can do like that. Again, I say go sit down with your agent, talk to them. If you want to get those premiums down, maybe you've got an old pickup truck, and you're like, man, I've always kept full coverage on it. Sit down with your agent and say, hey, if I total this thing out, what would the insurance company pay me? And he might be able to help give you a ballpark number, and you may go, man, I'm paying so much in insurance on this truck that if I just took the full coverage off of it, then, that would make more sense. Yeah. And so like I said, those are conversations I'm having in my office every day, just trying to help my customers, get something that makes sense to them. It's affordable, while at the same time making sure they're covered. That's the thing that I see that with customers that come in, again, they purchase something online and it's like their rate looks really good, but they essentially have very little coverage if something happens. And so there's that fine line. I tell people all the time, it's like, man, the last thing I want to do is for you to have to pay more for insurance. But what would make me feel even worse is if you have a claim and, you know, your house gets hit by a tornado and you're short $100,000 in coverage because you wanted to save some money on your premium, you know. So
some things are worth the money.
Yeah, it is. And I think that's where a good agent can help you kind of figure out, like, hey, if you're gonna pull back and try to save somewhere, let's do it here and not do it here.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, I just think those are conversations to have. And
you're right. My daughter has a Mazda that was my wife's many years ago.
Yeah.
It just got passed down, and she's had it. I mean, I don't know how old this car is, but it's been around, and it's done really well. Hardly had any trouble out of it. But, you know, if she wrecks that car, we're probably not going to fix it.
Yeah.
You know, because it's about time to get another one anyway. So, I mean, we raised the deductibles. We took off a lot of those extras, and you know, because it just didn't seem to be a point. And I think you're exactly right. You can look in there and you can start adjusting deductibles and things of that nature. Of course, it does come down to being a good driver, you know, and not getting tickets and things like that.
Helps.
Talk about some of those things that will raise your rate, like tickets, accidents. You mentioned that, you know, somewhere down the line it could raise your rate. Are there some things that we're not thinking about that can cause a rate increase, that, you know, things we can do to help ourselves?
Yeah, driving record is definitely a big part of it. You know, if you're you know, texting and driving is becoming, I mean, obviously we all know the dangers of that. But I think we're going to continue to see that affect your rate more and more if you get tickets for texting and driving or using your phone. And rightly so. You know, it's not something that we ought to be doing. Definitely, the claims thing is always going to be a factor. You know, if you're backing into stuff all the time and having to file a lot of claims, then that's going to affect your rate. You know, there's no two ways about it. I think one thing I didn't mention earlier, I would say that helps your rate a lot too. I have a lot of people that I talk to that'll have their auto insurance over here with this company, and they have their homeowners over here with this company, and their life insurance over here with this company, which is kind of a pain to do anyways. Mm-hmm. But almost any company out there, if you put everything at that one company, have them quote all that stuff together. You know, I know that it's that way with our company. You know, if we do your homeowners, your auto, and your life insurance, you're going to get discounts on everything for doing that.
Yes.
And not to mention, it saves you the headache of having to keep up with all the different places you have stuff.
Sure.
And so I would encourage anybody to do that. That's definitely going to save you on there too.
Yeah.
But those are just a few things. I mean, the auto insurance for sure is going to be based on your driving habits. You know, are you having accidents and claims? You know, are you getting speeding tickets and things like that? You know, the homeowners thing, I think, you know, just taking care of your property and doing maintenance on it really helps. You know, when I insure a property that's in really good shape and things like that, you know, there's some good things on there that help out your rate. But yeah, like I said, I think, I could tell you what Farm Bureau does to give people breaks on things like that. But whatever company you're with, I would just encourage people to sit down with your agent. You know, rates are, you know, what's not gone up in the last few years, you know, so insurance is kind of right there too. They've been forced to raise their rates at times. And so I think all of us would appreciate trying to find some savings in there. So sit down with your agent and figure out how you can do that.
Yeah, man, good advice. Thanks for coming on today and sharing all this with us. I know that you were a little apprehensive when I asked you to come on here, because you're like, I don't feel like I'm an expert in any of this, but you've helped me tremendously. And I really appreciate our friendship and that we can talk about these things off the record when I have a question, and you've always been helpful. And, you know, another one of our friends is with you. He goes to church here. And so between the two of you, I feel like I'm in good hands. And so I would encourage all of ministers out there that are thinking about this to, you know, you can email me, and, you know, I can forward that along to Chris. My email is chris.mccurley@rippleoflight.com. And I can forward any questions on to Chris Webb. And, you know, Chris, just want to thank you for being here today.
Man, I appreciate it. Hopefully there's something in there that helps somebody.
Absolutely. And I want to appreciate everyone for tuning in. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Sincerely, Chris.